All right. It looks like it's slowing down a little bit in terms of people jumping onto the webinar here. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to the Owls of Missouri. This is going to be a fun program this evening. And Sawwhat Owl here in this lead picture also says hi. As many folks might know on this webinar, we do some Sawwhat Owl banding and therefore sort of monitoring of their migration in the fall. I'm sure some of you have probably been there. And we actually do have a couple of recordings of the Sawwhat Owl banding. If you go into our MRBO Facebook page in the videos, if you want to check that out, if you haven't seen that. And so I'm going to go ahead and move forward the screen here. So I think we have a lot of new attendees tonight. I'm sure that a ton of people are familiar with Zoom after this last year that we've had, but just in case you're not as familiar with it, this is a webinar format. And so we cannot see or hear you, the attendees, so don't worry about that, but you're more than welcome to communicate with us or your fellow attendees. So you can use the chat function, which is probably down at the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you're using. And you can choose, if you click on that, you can choose to send your chat to just panelists or panelists and attendees. And then if you have a question, you can feel free to put it in the Q&A box. I believe we're gonna take questions for Paige at the end, but as she's speaking, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. So we are the Missouri River Bird Observatory. Our mission is the conservation of birds and their habitats through science, education, and advocacy. And these webinars are part of our education series. They're a fair amount of what we do right now while we're all doing, the socially distanced thing. But we're pretty thankful to be able to connect with all of you even in this way. So glad that you all are here this evening. Just so y'all know, we've got a bunch of cool webinars coming up. I think we just posted like the next couple months worth. And so that's at mrbo.org/events. You might have already signed up from there, but you might have gotten it from an email or social media or somewhere else. So just so you know, our whole calendar of upcoming webinars is on here. And if you go to the top of this screen, you'll see some arrows. And if you hit a back arrow, you can actually get to recordings of any of our other webinars that we've been doing for the last 8 or 9 months or so. So there's some neat things in there. So here's our, Paige hasn't seen this slide yet. So this is Paige and I with a Sawwhat Owl. And our presenter tonight is Paige Whittick, our education coordinator here at MRBO. And we're very lucky to have her, and I'm looking forward to this program. So Paige, I'm going to stop sharing and you can take it away.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm so excited all of you are here. This is going to be a super fun night where we talk about owls. So I'm going to share my screen, share my presentation. Okay, so Dana already did a introduction to everything. So tonight we're obviously going to be talking about owls. And if you want to learn more, like Dana said, about owls, we have a few videos of the Northern Sawwhat Owl banding on Facebook Live that are really fun to watch, seeing those cute little owls doing their thing. And you can also visit our website, of course. So what I want to do tonight, as we're talking about owls, is I really wanted to focus on for this webinar is some lesser known facts about owls. And what I'm going to attempt to do is pair this with information from some of the better known facts about owls by quizzing you, the audience. So we're going to find out what you know as well. And with all organisms, owl fun facts are all tied into the owl's ecology and adaptations. So hopefully, even if you already know a whole lot about owls, you can learn even more, or at least how all those facts kind of tie in together. And I apologize that we aren't going to be able to go into details about specific species of owl tonight. largely because there are at least 220 species of owls around the world. So there's a whole lot to discover, but we're going to focus on some neat adaptations that can be found in most owls. And I'll bring in specific examples here and there. And of course, there'll be some fun owl pictures as well. So some owl ecology to keep in mind as I go through the webinar. So a lot of the facts that I'm going to talk about are for owls that are largely nocturnal. So some owls, like the one pictured here on this slide, the barred owl, are more crepuscular, where they're active more at dawn and dusk. But a lot of the adaptations that we're going to talk about are for those owls that are largely nocturnal and live when it's really dark. So keep that in mind as well. Also, most of they're predators. So that plays into a lot of these adaptations as well. For the most part, preying on small mammals, but will also eat insects, other birds, including other owls, and anything else really that they can catch. So, you know, keep in mind like that predator mindset of like having to adapt, and some species also being prey, like particularly those smaller owls, like the northern saw-whet owl. So kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about these things. Also, keep in mind that they're found in a variety of habitats. Owls are very widespread. Different owl species can be found worldwide except for Antarctica. And while most owl species prefer forests and woodlands, owls can be found in a wide range of places, from open habitats such as deserts, tundra, and grasslands, to more dense marshes and bogs. Some owl species have even adapted to living in suburban and urban areas, which some of you may have noticed. I've seen actually a lot of barred owls, the one pictured here, this photo by Steve Johnson, out kind of in more urban areas. So that can be really fun to hear those in your backyard. So these three things kind of keep in the back of your mind as we're talking about these different adaptations that owls have. So let's start with one of the coolest and I think one of the most well-known facts about owls. So poll number one, Dana, if you want to launch this. So how far in degrees, so can an owl turn its neck around? Is it 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees? Hold on. Oh yeah, okay, everybody seems to be answering. Okay, so you see it up there. Or 360 degrees. And I'll leave that poll open. We'll leave it open for about 20 seconds or so, just to see what you guys know.
A lot of answers coming in.
Yeah, lots of answers. That's awesome. I'm so happy that you guys want to participate. That's so cool.
Paige, I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Is that the right thing to do? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
Okay, awesome. So it looks like most of you answered 270 degrees, and some of you answered some of the other answers, which is great, because we're going to learn something new today. So it's true that most owls can turn their heads 270 degrees, or at least 180 degrees in both directions. Not all, it's from my research, not all owls can do that 270 degree rotation, but most can. But they can go, even if they can't go that far, they can still go pretty far. Hawks also have this ability. They can do 180 degrees in both directions as well. And you may hear me comparing owls to hawks quite frequently in this presentation, because that's a great way to learn about different species, is comparing them to other things. But yeah, it looks like most of you are familiar with this. And if you're not, that's awesome, because we get to learn something new. So they also, I think this is a really great picture too of a short-eared owl. They also can turn their necks, as you can see, almost like all the way upside down behind them, as well as very, very far forward, looking down at their feet as well. And so they have a huge range of mobility in their necks. So, and what is interesting to me is there appears to be this myth that owls can turn their necks 360 degrees. So if that's something you're answered, that's not surprising to me, because for some reason there is this myth out there. But if we, what I tell a lot of students too, is if we take a step back and think about that. So imagine what turning your neck 360 degrees would do to your windpipe or your trachea. You wouldn't be able to breathe, and that would be quite detrimental to your survival. So it's puzzled scientists even to think about how an owl is able to turn their head 270 degrees. So let's talk about how owls are able to do this. So you may have heard, and it is true, that they have double the number of bones in their neck compared with us. We have 7 cervical vertebrae or neck or bones in our neck, and owls have twice as many. And it varies depending on species, but they have around 14. So they've got that alone is going to give you a lot more flexibility. So they have the bone structure. But what's really fascinating to me is the way this animal manages the flow of oxygenated blood to its brain. And this is where I bring up what I think are lesser known facts. So how does rotating their necks that far around not cut off the blood flow to their brains? Research conducted at 2013 at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine tried to explain just that. How can they rotate their necks this far around? So the study author, and I'm going to try to pronounce every name correctly, but hopefully I do it really close, but the study author, Dr. Philip Gayloud, explained that in a statement, if humans attempted to turn their heads as quickly or as far as owls do, artery linings would tear, causing blood clots to form and potentially leading to a stroke, not to mention broken necks. So it really puzzled people before this study. How are owls not dying of stroke everywhere from turning their necks this far around? So through medical imaging, so this graphic here that you're seeing is also from that study team at the Johns Hopkins University. And through medical imaging, researchers were able to study the bone and vascular structure in the heads and necks of a dozen owls that had died from natural causes. And what they found was a complex network of blood vessels that adapt to an owl's movement. So if we zoom in on this graphic a little bit. So while human arteries tend to constrict during head rotations, the researchers discovered that blood vessels at the base of the owl's heads continued to expand, allowing the imaging dye that they used to kind of mimic the blood that would be flowing through an owl's arteries. That when so these blood vessels continue to expand, and eventually that blood pools into these tiny reservoirs. So these reservoirs, researchers believe, minimize the restriction of blood flow and maintain eye and brain function while the heads are turning. So it's not so much that when they turn their heads, the blood flow is being cut off, isn't being cut off, but they've kind of developed this system to kind of have this reservoir of blood below their head so that even when they're turning, blood and oxygen can still get to their brain and eyes, which I think is so cool. Also, in addition, the study found, which I think this is really cool too, that a major artery that sustained the owl's brains passed through bony holes in the bird's vertebrae. So these hollow cavities were 10 times bigger in diameter than the artery passing through it. So according to the researchers, that extra space creates air pockets that cushion the artery and allow it to travel safely during twisting motions, which I think is just ingenious. So if we look a little bit closer again at this diagram at this part of the neck, so you can kind of see that those arteries are going through these tiny bone holes. And because the holes are larger than 10 times larger than the artery themselves, even when you're moving your neck, there's still space for the arteries to move so they don't cut off circulation as much in that main artery. So cool. Okay, so let's talk about why owls might need this ability to turn their necks this far around. And some of you may already know this, so this comes to poll number 2. And if you don't know it, don't feel bad. Why does an owl need the ability to turn their necks 270 degrees? Why? What else is it about them that requires them to have this flexibility in their neck? So Dana, if you want to launch poll 2, that would be fantastic. So you have the option of saying you don't know, and that's fine. And if you, yeah.
I wish I could vote. I think they think it looks cool.
It looks like it looks like a couple people are on your side, Dana. All right, so Dana should be sharing those with you. So yeah, awesome job, everybody. So and I think I have to accept that they think it looks cool as well. I think it looks cool. But yeah, so that their eyes have limited mobility. So hold on, let me close up my screen. Okay. So owls are able to so this like rotation, this neck rotation compensates for this ocular immobility, which I'm about to explain. So now we're going to talk more about owl eyes and owl vision, because it's fascinating despite how when an owl looks at you, it feels as though it's looking right into your soul, which I think is why so many people and communities feel a sense of spirituality around owls, and why they can hold such symbolism and meaning in both indigenous and non-indigenous peoples. It's their eyes and likely their different lifestyle and abilities that inspire this, like their role in spirituality. And we can explore that a lot more, but for right now, let's talk about owl eyes. Let's talk about their eyes. Okay, so this is, I believe, a replica of an owl skull, but I'm not quite sure. So an owl's eyes are large in order to improve their efficiency, especially under low light conditions, because remember, these owls are largely nocturnal in the dark. So in fact, their eyes are so well developed that they are not eyeballs, but elongated tubes. And they're held in place by these bony structures in the skull called sclerotic rings, and which you can see in this picture that you might think looks like a little bit, which stands out really in this picture. And so those are the sclerotic rings. And for this reason, an owl cannot roll or move its eyes. It can only look straight ahead. So you or I can hold our head still and we can look up, down, side to side, and all around without moving our head too much. Owls can't do that. Their eyes are held in place. But this does give the owl, like we have, binocular vision, which comparing to monocular vision, which is what you see when creatures have their eyes on the sides of their heads. And that helps with depth perception, being able to have binocular vision. It gives them the ability to judge distance more accurately. And so what we're gonna, and I do wanna kind of bring up this sclerotic rings thing for a second to be super clear. So they are rings of bone found in the eyes of many different animals and several groups of vertebrates, except for mammals and crocodiles. And they can be made up of single bones or multiple segments. And these rings are believed to have a role in supporting the eye, especially in animals whose eyes are not spherical or they live underwater like fish. And fossil evidence of sclerotic rings are known for a variety of extinct animals, including ichthyosaurs, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, but are often not preserved when they find those fossils, because at least I know from like experience with owl skulls is like they can be quite fragile. But what is unique about an owl's sclerotic rings are that they extend out much more to hold in place that large tubular eye. And you can see this difference in the owl's rings that are active at night versus this gull's rings, which are active during the day. And a lot of information, and I just wanted to clarify this because a lot of information about owls makes it seem like they're the only creatures with these sclerotic rings in these bones around their eye. And I just wanted to be clear about that. And keeping with the theme, in the theme of commonality that owls have with different things, in general, their eyes are a lot like ours. And here's how they work in a very, very basic sense. So light comes into the pupil of the eye and is picked up by the receptors at the back of the eye. some complicated things happen, and then nerves carry that information, about the light to our brains, which you can see here, the optic nerve. And the brain makes sense of that information and we see an image. So obviously that happens very fast. And now we're gonna take a closer look at the receptors. So as you can see, this diagram is a zoom in of that back of the eye there. There are two major kinds of these different receptors, and we have both. There are rods and cones. Rods only let us see black and white, but they work really well even if the light is very dim. Cones let us see in color, but only work well when it's pretty light out. So you may have noticed that if you look at things when it's sort of dark, you can only see shades of black and gray. And so owls have a lot more rods and not as many cones. So they lose color vision, but see a lot better at night because they have more of that ability to distinguish between black and gray. So rods outnumber cones 3-to-1 in owl species, including the great horned owl and barn owl, enabling them to see better than humans in nighttime darkness. So I showed this picture. This is not like an official owl vision picture. This is clearly just like a black and white photo of sun in a forest. But this is kind of what I kind of imagine that looks like in a little bit of a difference, is just an ability to distinguish between black and white a little bit better. So also, owls had a sort of mirror at the back of their eye. And this is called the Topedum Lucidum, which you can see in this diagram right here. So when the light goes past the rods and hits the mirror, the Topedum Lucidum, the light hits the mirror and it's reflected back at the rods, which are in this like kind of retina part here. So this means the owl gets 2 chances at catching each bit of light. So when you shine a light at an animal at night and their eyes seem to glow, you know they have a Topedum lucidum. So you'll see it in cats, if you have a cat, raccoons, possums, and a lot of others. And so you might be wondering why we don't have this, since it seems so useful. But the drawback of this ability is that it makes what you see slightly blurry. So animals that are active in the daytime often don't have them. But it's really interesting when looking at owl eyes. So their eyes are very large, and they're with large pupils that are built to pick up as many light rays as possible. And an owl's eyes are actually take up so much of their brain, so much of their head space, that you can see an owl's eyes by looking into their ears, which brings us to our next topic. You see, as cool as owls' eyes are, they are not their primary sense used for hunting. The owls are built for so much more. And if we really wanted to get into eyesight, we should really be talking about other raptors like hawks and falcons. But what the owl is most impressive at has to do with another sense. So now the third pole, specifically, so the third pole, so where are an owl's ears located on its head? And if you know a lot about owls, I'm gonna give the specificity of a more nocturnal owl. This is like more known in nocturnal owls. So this is, I think, Dana and I's favorite poll because of that last answer.
You know, Paige, I tried to allow myself to vote, but it still won't let me. So they don't have ears. You can't see them, so they're not there.
Unless it's this great horned owl. Even if you're not sure, feel free to put in your best guess too, because that's always just fun. All right. All right. So a little bit more mixed this time. So this is exciting. But it still looks like we've got a majority know that their ears are located asymmetrically with one ear at the top and one ear at the bottom. All right, so let's start showing some really cool pictures about this. Okay, so this owl hearing differs from that of humans in several ways, but I think this is kind of one of the like most, I don't want to say obvious because it's definitely not, nothing about owl ears is obvious, like Dana and I are saying. They're very hard to see. But understanding how owl hearing works tells us more about how they can find and catch prey in your darkness. So in a few owl species, the asymmetry in this ear position, so having one, as you can see, one ear, these are their ears right here, these like kind of holes here in the skull. So having this asymmetry in ear position can also be seen in the skull here. And this a unique adaptation allows the owl to determine what height a sound is coming from, as well as the direction. So asymmetrical ears send sounds to the brain with two slightly different signals that allow owls to pinpoint the source of where that sound is coming from, which is much better than our boring symmetrical hearing. So this is a great picture, I think, that kind of shows you a little bit where those owl ears are. And talking about how you can see an owl's eyes through its ears, that's its eye right there. So they're just kind of these like flaps in the sides of their head. So the ears of an owl lack this like obvious external structure that our ears have and are hidden within the feathers that make up the ruff that surrounds this facial disc. So the feathers of the ruff are thickened and coupled with other kinds of feathers of the facial disc, and this helps to channel sound towards the ears, which you may have heard like this kind of this shape of their face being compared to like a satellite dish or something like that, receiving information and sending it directly to their ears. And what's really cool, I think, is that the shape of this facial disc can be altered at will using special facial muscles that the owls have. Cool. So also an owl's bill, even their bill is pointed downward, and that increases the surface area over which the sound waves are collected by the facial disc. So even the shape of their beak kind of helps send that sound to their ears, which is really cool. So in common with the mammalian ear, or our ears, the ear of an owl has three recognizable regions. The outer ear, which is a lot less than our outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. So sound reaches the ear in the form of pressure waves, which are then channeled towards the eardrum, which is located within the middle ear. And what's different is the eardrum is proportionately larger in owls than it is in other birds. So through the eardrum and a single bone, the airborne sound waves are then transformed into fluid-borne vibrations, which trigger thousands of tiny hairs within the inner ear. And the sounds of different frequencies reach different parts of the inner ear and trigger different hairs to move. And so the resulting signals build up a complex picture of the sounds being received. So that's like a very like brief description of kind of how ears work. But we could go into that a lot more, but I'm not sure I'm the best person to describe that. But what's really cool, and I think this is a really neat picture by BBC, an owl uses these unique sensitive ears to locate prey by listening for prey movements through ground cover. So when they're moving through leaves or even snow or soil. So when a noise is heard, the owl is able to tell its direction because of the small time difference in which the sound is perceived in the left ear and the right ear. So for example, if the sound was to the left of the owl, the left ear would hear it before the right ear. The owl then turns its head, so the sound arrives at both ears simultaneously, then it knows the prey is right in front of it. And owls can detect a left-right time difference of about 0.0003 seconds, or 30 millionths of a second. So an owl can also tell if the sound is higher or lower in height by using this asymmetrical or uneven ear openings. So in a barn owl, the left ear opening is higher than the right, so a sound coming from below the owl's line of sight will be louder in the right ear. So we'll know that it's below it, which I think is really cool. So we kind of have, our ears allow us to have a general sense of where sound is coming from, and owls' ears really, and ears with their brain, allow them to have a much more pinpointed idea of where a sound is coming from. Okay, so this translation of left, right, up, down signals are combined instantly in the owl's brain, and they create a mental image of the space where the sound source is located. So studies of owl brains have revealed that the medulla, or the area in the brain associated with hearing as well as other things, is much more complex than in other birds. So a barn owl's medulla is estimated to have at least 95,000 neurons, which is 3 times as many as a crow, which we all know is one of those really highly intelligent species. So they're going to have a lot of neurons compared to other birds as well. And I couldn't find a direct comparison to a human brain, but one thing is clear from recent research about owls is that we don't know all that much about non-primate brains, including bird brains. And the research that is coming out shows that they are much more complex than originally thought. So we must not forget what these animals can teach us. We still have a lot to learn. Okay, but going back to medullas. So you can think of an owl's medulla as being a triangulation calculator. So just understand how triangulation works. Picture a triangle with one very short side and 2 very long sides that are unequal in length. One just a little bit longer than the other. The short side is the base of the triangle and the 2 long sides meet in a sharp point. Now imagine a mouse at the sharp point of the triangle. The base of the triangle is the distance between the owl's 2 ears. The long sides trace the distance from each ear to the mouse. So to triangulate a sound, the owl turns its head. When the 2 sides of the triangle are equal in length, the sound is arriving at both ears simultaneously, and that owl is directly facing its prey. And like I said, owls can detect that left-right time difference to 30 millionths of a second. And owls do this triangulation continually without thinking and even in rapid sequence while flying towards their prey. So cool. Okay, I need to take a glass of water. Okay, and I think one of the extraordinary examples of this is the hunting abilities of the great gray owl, which is what I'm showing you here. So they can be found in the very northern states of the United States and into Canada. And they spend time in wet bog-like forests. And what's really cool about these guys is, think about it like, yeah, they're up in this like tundra-y type habitat. And they can hear a mouse or other prey from over 330 feet away through snow as deep as 18 inches, which is super cool. So living in an area with a lot of snow cover, this power becomes much more valuable when you're hunting for prey. So like being able to hear that mouse under 18 inches of snow, even when it's far away, is really cool. And if you ever have the time, look up videos of great gray owls hunting, because it's really cool. Now, being able to hunt in this way also requires a lot of stealth, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So poll number 4, what about the owl's feathers helps give them silent flight? So this is another common topic that is often brought up around owls. What is it about the owl's feathers that help? So Dana, if you want to launch, okay, awesome. So is it the comb-like structures at the leading edge of the feather? So that's kind of cut off there. Jagged feathers on the trailing edge of the owl's wing, the velvety surface of the feathers, or all of those things? My presentation isn't cooperating. But Dana's sharing the PowerPoint, which is great. So a lot of you answered all of the above, which is correct. It's all of those things. And that is the end of my presentation, but I did want to show you this picture of this young snowy owl. There's so much more to learn, and also this grumpy eastern screech owl, but we're kind of getting low on time, and I really want to make sure we have time to answer any questions you have, but I do want to thank you all for listening. But before we do close out, I do have one last thing, because we got an email with some really great questions that I think a lot of you will be very curious about with owls. And one being how to attract owls to your yard. So this is a graphic from a Spruce article that I'm going to share with everyone in the chat about how to attract owls to your yard. They have a lot of great advice. But in general, if you're wanting to attract any specific bird to or group of birds to your yard, you got to think about their survival needs, right? So what do owls eat? Well, you got to create the habitat that attracts those things. So like really small rodents. But if you can get the owls there, you probably won't have as many rodents in your house. So that's a huge benefit. Also like water. So they get all of their water from eating their prey. But they do still will bathe in water. So providing a deeper bird bath may attract owls to your yard. But also with certain owls, you might be able to provide nest boxes for them. And it all depends on the habitat of your yard. So are you in a forested habitat? Are you more open? Are you edge? Because that might be really attractive to a great horned owl. If you're like kind of on the edge of a forest, what does your neighborhood look like? Can be an important part. So it's really hard to give like broad general things. But yeah, it'll depend on maybe like the type of owl and what your habitat looks like. And what you might be able to track. But it can be really fun to learn. And I do think this article goes through that really well. Also, I'm going to put in the chat a resource for nest boxes, and which is essentially nestwatch.org. If you haven't heard of it before, great resource for anything about bird nest boxes. They have specifications, how you can build your own, where to put them, how high to put them. Other tips like that, great stuff. So I'm going to put those two links in the chat for everyone to be able to read and learn more. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and then Dana and I can answer questions. But first, let me get those links in the chat for everybody.
Paige, we do have a couple questions in the chat, and I just want to encourage, we do have some...
Dana, for some reason, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if it's my computer.
I'll get closer. We do have some questions in the chat, and I do want to encourage people to put other questions in the chat or the Q&A, because Paige did leave ample time for answering questions. So Paige, okay. There was a question quite a bit earlier from Jesse. Why do some owls have different colored eyes than others?
Oh, great question. So, and why that's a great question is my understanding is that we don't really know for sure. A lot of ornithologists and owl specific ornithologists, I guess, have like ideas. So some think it might be related to what time of day the owls are most active, with, I believe, the darker eyes being more active kind of like that dawn and dusk time. Is that correct, or am I mixing that up?
Well, so I looked it up because I didn't know the answer, and so I looked it up while you were speaking, and it's the darker eyes they think are good for camouflage. There's not going to be as much reflection, so those are the more nocturnal owls, and the more crepuscular, so dawn and dusk, or diurnal, have the lighter eyes. But I wasn't able to find, kind of, you just mentioned, Paige, that we're not like totally sure why. I could see the camouflage at night and not reflectivity, but nothing that I found, whether even in scientific papers, as I was looking, really gives a good hypothesis for like what the advantage might be to the lighter eyes. But it is associated with time of day, as you said.
Right. But I guess that I think I got that mixed up because my like associated with dark-eyed owls is like the barred owl, which I know is like not a super nocturnal owl. I see them in the middle of the day hunting. So, it's like, so that example alone kind of breaks that theory for me.
Not a perfect correlation at all. True.
Yeah.
That's what I read that.
But that's a question that many have wondered. Oh, great. And Dana posted the answer to the feathers. Oh, and Pammy, yeah, you had the owl flyby experience. Oh, thanks, Karen. Can owls see more of the light spectrum than mammals as other birds can? Yes. So that is one thing I didn't mention, but that's not necessarily unique to owls. A lot of birds of prey, so like you are probably are referring to, birds can see in ultraviolet light. So they can see in that that, I forget which wavelength side that is. I think it's like the shorter wavelength, but so that's really cool alone. So what I think is cool about that is likely like hummingbirds probably look like even more magnificent being able to see in ultraviolet light. I bet it is. But birds of prey can also, and they think that this also helps them in their hunting ability. So being able to essentially spot their prey's urine. So if your prey is like scared from a predator, it might urinate, and then you're going to see that line, that trail go into a burrow or something like that. So yes, they can. When is the best time to see owls? So it depends on the species of owl. Like I said, like barred owls I'll see in the middle of the day. So you just got to keep an eye out. So those are the ones, that one that I showed kind of with the owl ecology one. Now, a lot of other owls, I'd say the best time if you don't want to just like be up in the middle of the night, is kind of like right before it gets dark. So like for short-eared owls that are out on the prairie, a good time to see them is like, so the kind of the harriers, the northern harriers go to sleep, and then the short-eared owls kind of wake up and take over. And then great horned owls, I'll hear them kind of around the same time, like particularly kind of this time of year, you'll hear them hooting. So you hear them making sounds, which is really exciting. So I highly recommend, if you're like trying to engage more with the owls in your neighborhood, like really listening is really a better, like just going out. And unfortunately, they're calling when it's typically really cold out. But if you sit out, you can listen for the different sounds. But like screech owls are going to be much more later at night. And then barn owls, again, you might be able to see them really early in the morning, like right after sunrise. Or that's the only time I've seen them. Not that I'm out there looking for owls every day, but so it really depends on the owl. And if you go to, I believe that kind of information is on allaboutbirds.org, that Cornell lab site that is like the best resource ever for all things bird, in my opinion. I believe they do kind of like specify that if you look at different owl species. Oh, thanks, Mary. Some nice compliments. What type of box for a barred owl? So yeah, so Janice, I highly recommend going to Nest Watch. Because there's plans on there specifically for barred owls. I checked. So I think they had ones for barred owls and for eastern screech owls, and then some other owl species that we don't have here in Missouri. I'm not sure where you live. You may live in a different state, but that'll let you know that for as well. But you're going to want a bigger box because they're bigger owls. And one of the field technicians actually told me the story about how they were going through on a survey, and they like looked into this like old wood duck box, and a barred owl flew out of it. So that would be kind of scary. But that wood duck size is kind of what you're looking at, pretty big. Do owl catch skunks? So I do believe that, I'm trying to think. I think I've heard that great horned owls catch skunks. Because an owl can carry, I think, what is it? Like 3 times its weight or something crazy like that. So a skunk is even like pretty, I mean, depending on the size of the skunk, I guess big skunks are pretty big compared to even great horned owls. But yeah, I believe those bigger owls will catch skunks. Because I don't think owls have a very keen sense of smell. So the smell probably wouldn't bother them. when do owls have their young? Okay, so owls have, so kind of around like kind of December, January, I think, they're starting kind of their mating season. So you'll start hearing them like hooting back and forth. And then I think, and then they kind of have their nest. I want to say like kind of, they'll start building their nest and stuff kind of like right around now, like kind of February, maybe late February. And then I believe and they have like a long incubation period and a very long nestling period. So I want to say like spring, end of spring is almost when we start seeing their babies come out. So, which is pretty cool. So kind of they have their young kind of, they'll start peeking out and stuff kind of around them. So right now is kind of like nest building time, I believe.
Hey, Paige, just so you know, it looks like Karen Davis had a couple comments on that last topic down kind of at the bottom. And then we also have 3 questions in the Q&A.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm scrolling through the chat right now. Thank you all for these awesome words. Yes, they tell all about their habits on All About Birds. Thank you, Pammy. Oh, and then Karen, yeah, so they have great horned owl nests in Lee Summit in mid-January. So yeah, so, and again, like I think when I'm giving this timeline, I think I'm thinking of great horned owls, but I'm not sure. But I guess maybe not, because that's the one that you're saying you see nests. But it obviously varies a little bit owl to owl and season to season. Yep, lots of barred owls start nesting in early March, very similar to red-shouldered hawks. So yeah, they start earlier than some of the other bird species we know. So, which I think is kind of cool to have. I think it's just fun to hear their like sing their songs at a time when we don't get to hear many other songs. A few years ago, a snowy owl picked up and carried a little dog in our town. Oh my gosh. And yeah, I'm sure it was very rare to have that snowy owl there. Yes, great horned owl can carry 3 times its weight, but not seeing detail about other owls. Yeah, I believe, I think that transfers to other owls, but yeah, for sure the great horned owl. Thanks for looking that up, Mary. Do they build a new nest every year or reuse old ones? How many young do they have? So again, I think that very much varies depending on the species of owl. I believe, see, like, I think even like barred owls and great horned owls will use other birds' old nests. So particularly like eagle nests and things like hawk nests that are already about the great size. So to me, I think of them as more like lazy nest builders. So I think when they do make it, there's not much structure to it. And then as far as cavity nesters, I believe they do reuse those old ones year after year because it takes a lot to like find a good cavity. So if they know of a good one, they're going to keep it and defend it. And so how many young they have, again, is going to depend, but they're going to have less than maybe what you typically think of as a bird. So I think, but then like saw-whet owls can have like more than I would have thought too. And I forget the specific numbers on that, but I'd say my guess would be like 1 to like, I feel like 4 is still really high.
I think 5 on saw-whet is high, is really high.
That would be like, whoa, that parent is ambitious. Great. Okay, I'm gonna go into the Q&A now. Have you ever gotten to see a great gray owl? Love the little. I have not, but I have tried, Evelyn. I went to Saxon Bog because great gray owl is like #1 on my owl list. And we saw a boreal owl when I went there, which was really cool and like is much more rare for people to see there. So that was really nice. And they're one of the tiny ones. But I didn't find a great gray. But the day after I left, I got notified that there was one on one of the main roads. You know how it goes. Do owls eat a lot of roosting songbirds at night? It makes me wonder if I really want to provide an owl nest box. So Barbara, yeah, I'm glad that you're considering that because by providing an owl nest box, you are bringing in a predator into your area. Now, as far as I don't think I've read any account of them eating the roosting songbirds, but I don't think like songbirds are like prized prey for owls. I think they much prefer like small mammals and things like that. So I'm not sure if that's something like you'd really have to worry about. And those songbirds are going to be pretty good at flying away from big owls. But it is definitely something to consider. But Dana, do you have any more information on that?
Well, yeah, and Barbara, thank you for putting that into the Q&A here as well, because Barbara emailed us. So I looked into it, and I haven't been able to find, a paper that like seriously quantifies that and says, well, it's, I was kind of hoping for something that would be like, it's, songbirds are 5% of their prey or 10% of their prey, and I wasn't able to find anything like that. But from what I could see, obviously everything that's out there really mentions voles, shrews, mice. So it does happen. I've seen mention of that northern saw-whet owls will do so during migration. But it just really doesn't seem to be that common of a phenomenon. So I mean, I guess I would say that if you want to get an owl box, I wouldn't consider that a reason to not get an owl box. I think that it'd be a relatively rare occurrence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I think that's a great summary of that. Which makes me think about another question that Barbara asked that I looked up that I want to touch on, because I didn't necessarily know the specific answer, but I was very curious about it as well. So particularly like she like asking, will owls and hawks play nicely together? So like, will they inhabit the same area, or like, are they predators of each other? And essentially, adult large owls don't have many natural predators except for other owls. So owlets can fall prey to any nest foraging predators such as weasels, prowling cats, and raccoons. So owls I mean, if you're a bigger owl, most of your threat is when you're a baby, you're a little owlet. But hawks and owls have been known, kind of around breeding season to get really territorial. So they're going to defend their nest. So you may see them like kind of fighting with each other. And that's out of, being territorial and wanting to protect their nest from those other predators. But other bigger owls will prey upon smaller owls. So I think that's interesting. Okay. Let's see. Do they migrate? Yes, but not all of them. So the species that are here all year round in Missouri are the great horned owl, the barred owl, the eastern screech owl, the barn owl, and what am I missing? And the migrating ones are the northern saw-whet owl. So that's partially why we're banning them, to get more information about their fall migration, and the short-eared owl. So they're here right now, but they'll fly back up north during the spring. And I don't know when they start doing that, but and then I know I'm missing. Oh, long-eared owls, pretty rare, but I believe. Well, actually, I don't know. Are they here they're here year round, aren't they?
I do not believe so.
No, just winter?
They are very rare. I believe that they are casual, as birders say, in winter, but I can check it out real quick.
Is it more like snowy owls?
What's that?
Is it like snowy owls, like that behavior?
I think they're more regular than that.
Oh, okay. So like, yeah, snowy owls, yeah, they just kind of come down in those eruption years.
Right. I'll check it out real quick.
It's hard sometimes for me to remember specifics about each species, but I want to answer to the best of my ability. So how much nest building do they do versus using abandoned nest cavities? So with those cavity nesters, I don't think there's that much nest building at all, from what I understand. Maybe some light like fluff around the base, or they'll use like they'll shed their own, like they'll have some of their own feathers in there. And like if you've ever, and then there's just like, yeah, I don't think there's much nest building. And then and like when the babies are in there, there's just like carcasses of different things in there. But yeah, not much at all.
Hey, Paige, I have an answer from the Department of Conservation website and a couple others actually. Mid-November to mid-April, pretty unlikely. And then because the MDC website just reminded me of this, did you mention short-eared? As far as okay, cool, thanks.
I think so. Yeah, because they're on my mind right now. Out on the prairie. Oh, I see. So it looks like we have some questions about feral cats. And I believe that's in reference to the same with Rachel's question, which is like, do owls eat cats? Or if feral cats are a predator to the young, maybe as well. So I believe so. I don't see why they wouldn't eat cats, but I don't like that's, again, I don't think that's like one of their, I haven't read anything specifically about that. Because again, that's not like a natural prey that they would have in like this area. But they are a mammal, and they definitely, those bigger owls would have the means to do so. I would think kittens, like smaller ones, probably so. As far as being a cat being a prey upon a young owl, if the cat got up into an owl nest, if it somehow found its way up that tree, you betcha.
Paige, these questions also relate to a comment that Janica put in the chat about, owls taking songbirds, and she brought up that barred owls will definitely do so if they can. And it reminded me that they also prey on crayfish, which I thought is kind of cool. But I just wanted to bring up, like, as far as, cats, particularly great horned owls, barred owls, and songbirds, they'll eat whatever they can. I mean, just because their diet is, largely known to be made up of small mammals, and Paige explained all of the excellent and incredible adaptations for hunting in the various habitats as she described. Like pretty much any wild creature, birds of prey specifically, they will take what they can get. So
yeah, it's just like us. Like we all individually have our preferred foods, but when it comes down to it, we're gonna eat what we need to eat. And what comes across our plate.
If we're cold and
Yeah.
something makes itself available, or we're migrating and burning a ton of energy doing so.
Right. Okay. Are they usually solitary? One winter night, I saw 3 small ones. I think saw-whets in a line on a road. So that is really cute. And what you and so if they're saw-whets, that's a little bit like, for the most part, owls are usually pretty solitary. Other than their mated pair, they're not going to really hang out with other owls. And I think that's quite true of like quite a few different, almost across all species. I'm trying to think if I can think of an example where they're not quite as solitary.
Burrowing owls are the only one I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm not familiar with like all the tropical species or anything like that.
Right.
But in America, that's the one that comes to mind for me.
Right. And even they are kind of like, this is my nest. But the saw-whets, so they're the migrating species. And so based on like how we kind of catch owls, we have this like non-official theory that they travel in these like small little pods, like groups of like maybe 3 to 5 owls. But this is just like purely like us just saying things. I don't think that's like been shown in any study or anything. So that might be what you saw, or there, I mean, be slight, especially if it was in Missouri. But also, if you see like groups of owls like that, it's likely a parent with some young, because they do kind of stay with their parent even out of the nest for a little while. But like the sowets don't breed in Missouri, so that wouldn't quite make sense. But maybe they're following their parents' migration. I don't know. But yeah, owls are very mysterious still in a lot of ways, which I think is just really cool.
Janice said barred owls ate all our goldfish.
Oh, were they in an outdoor pond? Oh, well, you made it. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, there are definitely some stories about things like that happening. Yeah, and I know we're past 6:30, so and I think we're wrapping up. Anyway, it looks like the questions are starting to slow down. We love to answer questions, and I'm so thankful for all of your curiosity. And I really hope that you learned at least one new thing, or just made a connection between two facts that you didn't know before, or just enjoyed this awesome conversation about owls. Oh, yep. Cool.
Paige, should we let everybody go?
I think we should let everybody go. Thank you all for attending. It was really fun.